Welcome to the American Tradition. I'm your host, pastor, farmer, localist, essayist, Jeremy Mack. Today we're going to explore voter fraud in the U.S. Where do we stand? So we're going to take a look at Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona. Today we're going to look at the most likely places for voter fraud, and we're going to I've weeded through a lot of what's been going on, and I've removed all the dubious, what I would call dubious reporting. So as we open up in Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania will have a very, very interesting exchange between Rudy Giuliani and one of the other lawyers for the staff. And so this is what's been going on in Pennsylvania. This was from a state legislature meeting last week where the Trump legal team was making their case before the legislature to give examples of places where they thought voter fraud existed. So let's play that now. Just a short clip, about 1 minute and 25 seconds.
Very beginning of the chart where there's a circle, it says on election day. What that indicates is there is a spike in loaded votes, 337,000 plus or minus some votes that were added in there in one big batch. So that was an anomaly in the reporting. Normally you would expect to see a smooth curve going up, not any big spikes. That's kind of what Greg was talking about, the anomalies of loading.
Yeah, later in this video, we'll show that those spikes on the charts, and so you can see it. And one of the things that'll be sort of demonstrated is, if you're in a township, a small township or a small city, and let's just use round numbers for the ease of it. Let's say there's 100 people there. So if you're uploading 100 votes from one small town, you might see an 80-20 disparity of votes for one candidate or another, right? So you might get 80 votes for one and 20 votes for the other. But that's in a small place. But if, for instance, you are uploading hundreds of thousands of votes, the more votes you cull into a vote dump or a vote update, the more it should resemble the arc of the overarching population. So let's just, let's say that Donald Trump and Joe Biden, and they were in a poll, and let's say it was like 51-49, or it should be, or maybe it's 52-48. So you should have something in a large vote dump that looks more similar to a cross section of the entire population, not these extreme anomalies, these big jumps on the chart. So let's go back to the state legislature meeting.
And uploading those votes. So that big spike that occurs there is a prime indicator of fraudulent voting.
And that's 604,000 votes in 90 minutes, is that right?
Correct. This is 337 votes, 337,000 votes in that
period of time.
Yes.
And when you look at this entire curve with all these spikes, can you calculate how much of a vote that accounted for Biden and how much for Trump?
Close to 600,000. I think our figures were about 570 some odd thousand that all those spikes represented over time.
For Biden?
Correct.
And how much for Trump?
I think it was a little over 3,200.
Let's leave the laughing in there for dramatic effect. You can see, so when I explained earlier, that you should have something that looks more closer to the overall population polling in those states, even the extremely wrong polling we had throughout this election cycle, which was, those polls were in no way polls in the sense of the word. That was social engineering. But I digress. So anyway, you should have had something a little bit closer to the broader population. 600,000 votes coming in for Biden, 30,000 votes coming in for Trump across in a short period of time is an anomaly of an anomaly. It's an outlier of an outlier of an outlier of an outlier. So that's a really, really good place to start looking for voter fraud. I mean, when the media says no evidence for voter fraud, that's evidence of voter fraud. I mean, it may not be voter fraud, all right. So, but it needs to be investigated. I mean, that's the thing the media is supposed to do. The media is supposed to investigate and clear these things. They're not supposed to be sort of like government lackeys. They're supposed to be the fourth estate, and the fourth estate is supposed to hold the government accountable, not literally be a part of them. That's why the mainstream media has pretty much become a propaganda organ. They make, extreme statements from the left, and it's just gotten to the point where many of us have to go out here, like I'm doing today, and find out good information and bring it to you as much as we can. I have to go to places where the mainstream media would say they were phony sites, but they're not phony sites. I mean, we're watching a legislature. This was broadcast on C-SPAN. We're watching a legislature put these things out, but it's a total media blackout from all the mainstream sources. So Pennsylvania's been a place of interest because Donald Trump, I think, was ahead something like 700 or 800,000 votes when we went to bed on election night, November the 3rd. And we woke up in the morning to find Joe Biden ahead. And it was a strange thing. I'll show you that because I have some charts later on in this video to show vote dumps and how they, when they came in and what they look like on a chart. So, but just to kind of wrap up Pennsylvania, interesting things, you had you actually had an injunction against certifying the race last week. I think it was on Friday. A judge, Patricia McCullough, she ruled in Pennsylvania that they shouldn't certify. Now she's been overruled since then by the state Supreme Court, but she wrote there something very interesting. She said that the plaintiffs, so she put out her ruling. I don't think it was necessary for her to do this. I think this was something that she put out on an opinion more quickly than it was required. So, but I think she's required, but I just think she put it out more quickly than it was required. So it says, in her opinion, that the plaintiffs, that's the Trump, President Trump's legal team and President Trump, the plaintiffs have established a likelihood to succeed on the merits of the case because the Constitution, that's the U.S. Constitution, does not provide a mechanism for the legislature to allow for the expansion of absentee voting without a constitutional amendment. All right, so what's she talking about? Well, in the U.S. Constitution, the election mechanisms are all under the power of the legislatures of the states. All right, well, there's been a lot of changes that were made to mail-in ballots across the country, some by legislatures, some not. And in Pennsylvania, you have some changes that were made to the way ballots would be handled that the legislatures didn't make. So for instance, the state Supreme Court said mail-in ballots could be counted that came in as late as 3 days after the election. So they're at 8 p.m. on election day is when they have to have arrived. And if they didn't arrive by that time, they're actually an illegal ballot. If they don't arrive with their security envelope on them, they should be an illegal ballot. They arrive without a post mark on them, they should be an illegal ballot. And the reason that you wouldn't have, you would necessitate a postmark is because postmarking shows when the ballot arrived. Otherwise, people could be bringing ballots into the building that were filled out elsewhere or brought in from elsewhere or that came in afterward. So you can't have people canvassing for ballots after the 8 p.m. on election day. But in Pennsylvania, the Supreme Court, as I said, made some decisions. The election board made some decisions, but a lot of the decisions they made were not according to what the state legislature had already written in its law. And what this judge is saying is that, look, if this thing goes up to the Supreme Court, this election may end up being an illegal election. It may end up having a lot of issues in regards to votes there. And so, that's why it's important for us to abide by the law, because, if Pennsylvania is turned around, not only is it a giant win for the Trump team, but it's going to cause a lot of distrust. And that's one of my concerns. I'll make a video about this later on in the week. I think on Thursday. I'm looking to make videos on Tuesday and Thursday for you guys. On Thursday this week, I want to talk about how we've transitioned into a low trust society and how our instability could affect our standing in the world, not way off in the future, but in pretty short order. But back to Pennsylvania. So these things in Pennsylvania where they have not abided by the law, this judge is saying, even though the state Supreme Court now overruled her and they're going to certify, but she's stating, because I think she understands this case was very likely to go to the Supreme Court, that when this case arises at the Supreme Court, do not be surprised to find that the plaintiff actually has merits, and that this thing could be turned around. All right, let's jump over to Wisconsin. Only one thing for Wisconsin, really close election there. If you're interested, there's a guy named Matt Brainerd, the Voter Integrity Fund. You should look into his work. He also testified in Arizona yesterday. I just didn't want to make this video too long, but Matt Brainerd, yes, he is a Trump guy. All right. But I watched his 40-minute presentation, not to the legislature, but when he completed his work, I sat down and watched his 40-minute presentation, and he just lays out everything. They've had people calling voters and just asking, did you request a ballot? Did you request a mail-in ballot? And they got significant queries or they got significant answers of no, significant enough that would have changed the election. And he's made the case that he didn't think that this could be certified because of these anomalies. I mean, in Georgia, there's another. I didn't even add that in here, but there's a former FBI agent who's found something like 17,000 mail-in ballots that have forwarding addresses outside of the state of Georgia. That means they voted. They were citizens of Georgia at one time, but have moved to other states, and they voted in the Georgia election. Now, I think the Georgia election is only separated by like 10,000 votes. What do you think the odds are? Those 17,000 votes are almost all for Joe Biden. I'd bet my farm on that bet. I'd make that bet. That's what I'm saying. And so that's enough to swing an election. Georgia comes down, Pennsylvania comes down. We're going to look at Arizona in just a minute, but let's move to Georgia before we go to Arizona. And Sidney Powell's famous, Kraken lawsuit there. And so what I found most interesting is one little tidbit inside of that is this guy, Navid Keshavares Nia, right? He is a cybersecurity expert. He is vice president and senior director in InfoSec with 30 years of experience in national security, spanning leadership and program execution, supporting the civilian, defense, and U.S. intelligence agencies. So you can see down here that as we close, he's an experienced ethical hacker, big data architect, and cloud security expert in cloud computing, blockchain technology, and big data analytic solutions. He has led or supported the CIA, NSA, DHS, U.S. certifications, U.S. Cybercom, and the FBI in war games and things of that nature in regards to cybercrime, cybersecurity. And so here's what he has to say. So we go back up here, and the New York Times, this is from a story in September of 2020. Navid Keshavares Nia, those who worked with him said he was always the smartest person in the room. In doing cybersecurity and technical counterintelligence work for the CIA, NSA, and FBI, he had spent decades connecting top secret dots. That's the New York Times. Now, I'm sure they've done a hit piece on Dr. Keshavares now, because you can't have this guy out here talking about voter fraud. But he signed a declaration. It's included broadly in the Georgia and the Michigan lawsuit brought by a famed attorney now, Sidney Powell. What does he say in there? So what does the brilliant Dr. Keshavares Nia have to say? Hammer and scorecard is real, not a hoax. Now, that's pretty interesting. Hammer and Scorecard is supposedly two software applications that were used by the Central Intelligence Agency and other places to sort of manipulate voting in other countries. Don't be naive, don't be naive. I would tell you, these these types of applications do likely exist. Now, whether they were used here or not, I'm not making that claim. I'm just reporting what Dr. Kershavar's NIA has to say about it. But I would encourage us not to be naive and to just swallow hook, line, and sinker with the New York Times or the Washington Post or, you know, some other mainstream media organ says. You know, he says hammer and scorecard are real. Those are applications that have been reported in other countries that we have used, and I'm sure our allies have used. You know, we don't want certain tin pot dictators to be elected in certain countries, and so we manipulate the election outcomes in those areas if we can. We interfere in elections all the time. You know, it's one of the things now that's come to the forefront that I find funny, that we are complaining a lot about election interference when we pretty much have been the most interfering nation probably in the elections of others for a long, long time. But I digress. So he says hammer and scorecard are real. He says Dominion, ESNS, Cytel, and Smartmatic are all vulnerable to fraud, vote manipulation, and the mainstream media reported on these vulnerabilities in the past. That's true, they have. You will find Elizabeth Warren and Amy Klobuchar have brought up, especially Dominion's history and some issues that have happened with it. Dominion has been used in other countries to forge election results. Dominion's corporate structure is deliberately confusing to hide relationships with Venezuela, China, and Cuba. Now, I've pretty much confirmed that. I can put up a document, and I'll try and do that. I'll put up the link here where we actually have a WikiLeaks cable that was hacked and brought out, and in 2006 was written by a U.S. Specialist in Venezuela, in the Venezuelan embassy, one of our specialists in the Venezuela embassy. And it goes and outlines and details Dominion's original structure and where it came from, way before any of this happened. So we're talking about 2006. We're talking about 14 years ago. So, and it's hacked. There's no, you know, it's one of those things that WikiLeaks hacked and brought to the forefront. You know, Dominion machines are easily hackable. Again, we've seen that. They demonstrated it in the Arizona legislature meetings just the other day. And we've also seen that from other hacking conferences. Dominion memory cards with cryptographic key access to the systems were stolen in 2019. Now, that's new information. I would love to see that confirmed in other areas. So, and this, he also says this, he says, although he had no access to the machine, Kershavar has looked at the available data. Remember, he's an expert in data analytics, available data about the election and the vote results based on what information he concluded. Based on that information, he concluded the counts in the disputed states, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia, show electronic manipulation. And here's one of the things too, and this is where I sort of came out of my skin on election night, this number 2 here. The simultaneous decision in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Arizona, Nevada, and Georgia to pretend to halt counting votes was unprecedented and demonstrated a coordinated effort to collude toward desired results. I have followed elections closely since I was a child. I have always been a sort of political junkie. I love election seasons. For me, come around every 4 years. The way some of you people think about the Olympics, I think about presidential elections. I keep up with elections, local, federal, state. I like the stuff in general. I have never, ever seen a presidential election count stopped in the middle of the night. Never. Just stop it and go home. Chain of custody is broken. When you do that, you have to move those ballots. You can't leave everything where they are. Everything is unsupervised. It's chaos. Poll watchers. It's a huge problem with this election. I cannot state that clearly enough. That is enough right there. These disputed states stopped the count in the middle of the night. We already know now Georgia stopped their count supposedly because of a busted water main. It was an overflowing toilet. It was not a busted water main. All right, they've brought that to the forefront now. So Now, number 3, 1 to 2% of votes were forged in Biden's favor. Optical scanners were set to accept unverified, unvalidated ballots. The scanners failed to keep records for audits, an outcome that must have been deliberately programmed. In other words, we want to go back and audit. Oh, too bad. The information's not there. They failed to keep records because now you can't make an audit. It'll take a forensic audit. You would actually have to have, super sleuth hacking experts go in there and figure all this out. The stolen cryptographic key, which applied to all voting systems, was used to alter vote counts. The favorable votes pouring in after hours for Biden could not be accounted for by Democratic preference for mailed-in ballots. They demonstrated manipulation. For example, in Pennsylvania, it was physically impossible to feed 400,000 ballots into the machines within 2 to 3 hours. Dominion used Chinese parts. There's reason to believe that China, Venezuela, Cuba interfered in the election. There was a hammer scorecard cyber attack that altered votes in the battleground states and then forwarded the results to Seidel servers in Frankfurt, Germany to avoid detection. The systems failed to produce any auditable results. That is all serious business. And this guy is not a fly-by-night, guy in his, underwear figuring out the data. This man's job is to figure this out. All right. He is this bio I read to you. This is from a 2017 summit where he is the speaker, cybersecurity summit speaker, Navid Keshavar's Nia. Sorry, I keep getting his name wrong. But so this is from 2017. I went and looked this up to make sure I didn't get like a Wikipedia thing where somebody had gone in like 10 minutes ago and threw out every bad thing they ever thought he did or researched a couple of things to like throw him under the bus so they could pull him down, or before the New York Times even knew who he was. So I went back and found this bio from a conference that he spoke at, so you can clearly see it. All right. So when we move out of Georgia, now we're going to move over into Arizona. All right. So Arizona, and this is the most interesting part of the Arizona legislature hearing that the Trump team presented the other day, which I just find to be fascinating. Again, and I think it's in the data that you're going to find it's in the data culling and the things that are improbable, where you're going to find evidence of fraud. And you can't just have the media continually saying there's no evidence. Look, I've presented already one piece of evidence and back in the Pennsylvania legislature. Now I'm going to present one from Arizona, and the one from Arizona to me is as startling as the one from Pennsylvania. So here we go. Let's roll into that. This is Dr. Shiva Ayadurai, and he, again, I may be mispronouncing his name, but he's a super smart guy. Let's look at his bio right quick. So Dr. Shiva Ayadurai, the inventor of email and polymath, holds 4 degrees from MIT. That's the Massachusetts Institute for Technology. You got to be super brilliant even to get into the place. Holds 4 degrees from MIT. Is a world-renowned systems scientist, inventor, and entrepreneur. He's a Fulbright scholar, a Lemelson MIT Awards finalist, India's first outstanding scientist and technologist of Indian origin, Westinghouse Science Talent Honors Award recipient, and a nominee for the U.S. National Medal of Technology and Innovation. All right, this is not, again, some fly-by-night, some guy sitting around in his underwear going through the election data. This is a guy who has some moxie. He's got the credentials. Now you're going to get online, you're going to go to Wikipedia, you're going to go to the New York Times. There's some hit stuff out there on him. All right. So, but let's just take him as it actually is. All these things are true. All right. Now let's go and look at what he says and what his team found.
This iteration process, again, with the computer was done, and the only one that we were able to come close to matching was this. And I want everyone to look at this carefully. So out of all the potential universe, which we've done, and we're going to continue doing this, by no means is this done, we find that the interesting possibility we find here is when the Democrat percentage is 130% Mr. Biden and negative 30% Mr. Trump, and the Republican percentage is 0, 100, the independent is 30%, 58%, libertarian 0, 60, 60, 0. But what's extraordinary about this graph, again, you know, we went through many, many, many iterations. It matches perfectly, near perfectly. The slopes match, the curves match, the shape match. So what this tells us is that this demographic distribution of allocation of party affiliations is what can generate this. And I find it highly implausible because this means that Mr. Biden got 130% of Democrat voters and negative 30%, and President Trump got negative 30%. So
That's enough.
this
right
iteration
there. That's enough right there for us all to see. You know, I'm going to actually see if I can throw that back up on the screen. I hope you stopped it before we got there. Yeah, there we are. 130% of Democrats. That's impossible. You can't get more than 100% of anything. And that Donald Trump didn't get a single Democrat vote, that's impossible as well. In every election, there are some Republicans who vote for Democrats and some Democrats who vote for Republicans. So you got a negative 30%. Not only did he not get zero, he got 30% less than zero. And Biden got 30% more than 100. And then they have some distributions out here for the Green Party and other third parties, and at a 0% for Republicans, right? What you've got is a crazy chart that cannot be explained. All right. And he shows on the graphs that the graphs match perfectly. The arcs line up together perfectly. That's the way this demographic distribution had to have been in place to create that arc on a graph when they upload the vote dumps, okay, when they're putting the vote updates in place. That's what this is created out of. So super interesting stuff. And again, that's enough, I think, for you really to look at. But so we're going to jump over here. This is Revolver news. And so we're going to look now just at a summary of the report. So some of you have probably already seen this. So this is this jump they were talking about, some of the jumps they're talking about here. So this is in Michigan, right? This one is in Wisconsin. So, right? All right. And so then you're going to find, let's go back up. I'm sorry, I don't want to make you dizzy here. Look, there's some real interesting information that is found in here. So hopefully I'm in the right story. Here we go. 4 to 7 of the most extreme vote dumps decided the election for Joe Biden. Four of the 7 most extreme vote dumps decided the election for Joe Biden. This alone is bizarre and fundamentally cuts against the narrative of a moderate increase in suburban and ex-urban areas. These 4 vote dumps were quantifiably far more extreme than virtually every other vote dump, with only a few others as extreme in their aberration from the inverse pattern observed everywhere. The odds of these 3 states, Georgia, Wisconsin, Michigan, being so well represented at the top of the distribution is just over 1%. And when you factor in the vote dump in Georgia is the 9th most extreme, the odds that these 3 states have 5 of the top 10 most extreme vote dumps drops to less than 1%. Clearly, there's something different about these states than others, including other blue states or even the Midwestern states where a deep blue urban population offsets the red rest of the state, Illinois and Minnesota, or states like Colorado, Texas, or Oregon, where the urban areas are also vastly more Democratic than the rest of the state. So now I'm going to take you to, this is a vote pattern analysis Substack, okay? Vote pattern analysis Substack. Substacks are great. They're the way a lot of independent journalists are making their money now. They're basically newsletters. Most of them you have to pay for. So this one though, you can find for free. So this is the 4 updates. So those 4 of the 7 that we're talking about decided the election. So these are the people that wrote the actual article that Revolver built their article out of, or this is not actually an article, this is a newsletter. And so this is the actual information that Revolver, where I just was, used to build their article off of. So they linked to this article. So I found this before I found the Revolver article, because the Revolver article does some summary work. But so if you're an egghead, I would read this whole thing. Yeah, first of all, let's go to the top executive summary. In the early hours of November 4, 2020, Democratic candidate Joe Biden received several major vote spikes that substantially and decisively improved his electoral position in Michigan, Wisconsin, and Georgia. Much skepticism and uncertainty surrounds these vote spikes. Critics point to suspicious vote counting practices, extreme differences between the two major candidates' vote counts, and the timing of the vote updates, that's one of the things I want to focus on as we close. The timing of the vote updates, among other factors, to cast doubt on the legitimacy of some of these spikes. While data analysis cannot on its own demonstrate, data analysis cannot on its own demonstrate fraud or systemic issues, it can point us to statistically anomalous cases that invite further scrutiny. Let's jump down here then. Having trouble speaking today. Apologize, folks. So the 4 vote updates in question are: an update in Michigan listed as of 6:31 a.m. Eastern time on November 4th. So this is what I mean. We went to bed on election night with Donald Trump in significant leads in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, and Georgia. And we woke up in the morning on November 4th to the lead being either taken away, or you saw such a big chunk taken out of it, you wondered what happened. And then you also noticed again that it was in these states that just inexplicably decided to stop counting their votes, which is just something that cannot be explained. Is it just a coincidence that we have these huge vote dumps, and then a coincidence that the places where we have these huge vote dumps are places that just inexplicably stopped counting? Something that has never been done in presidential elections. If it has, I'm not aware of it. Okay, it's so rare, I'm unaware of it. All right. So I've never seen an election not be called by 11, 12 o'clock at night, except for the 2000 election between Bush and Gore, which was decided in Florida. Many of you may not even know that, but I'm sure the news cycle has brought it up so much you're more aware of it now. So the 4 vote updates, then we'll get back to them. An update in Michigan listed 6:31 a.m. on November 4th, 2020, which shows 141,258 votes for Joe Biden and 5,968 votes for Donald Trump. An update in Wisconsin listed as 3:42 a.m. on November 4th. Okay, here we go. We got a pattern. Middle of the night, early morning, November 4th, 2020, which shows 143,379 votes for Joe Biden and 25,163 votes for Donald Trump. A vote dump in Georgia listed at 1:34 a.m. Eastern time on November 4th, 2020, which shows 136,155 votes for Joe Biden and 29,115 votes for Donald Trump. An update again in Michigan. So Michigan has 2 of these 4 updates. An update in Michigan listed at 3:50 a.m. Eastern time on November 4th, 2020, which shows 54,497 votes for Joe Biden and 4,718 votes for Donald Trump. This report predicts that what these vote updates would have looked like had they followed the same pattern as the vast majority of the 8,950 others. So they've already done 8,950 updates total, right? And so this report predicts what the votes would have looked like if everything had followed the same pattern. Because that's the thing, you've got some things that are totally out of whack when you start looking at them on graphs. You start looking at them on graphs and you see, look at this in Michigan again. You see this in Wisconsin. In Wisconsin, the arc is the same, and then it begins to open up, and then it flattens out, and then it jumps up, and then it pretty much stays flat. You see how it stays flat? This is the vote dump that settles Wisconsin. Look at Trump's vote in Michigan here. Basically, Donald Trump has a lead all night long. And then a big jump here, huge jump, right? You can see a lot of this on measurement. So anyway, they go through here and show the weird things are about. This is a really long essay. It has a lot of data points in it. I would suggest if you're interested in these things, you take the time, go down to the links as I post them up, and do this for yourself. But the charts don't lie. These are real sources. These are things that the media refuses to cover. And here's what I want, personally, what I want as a citizen of the United States. This is what I want. I want to put my head on my pillow the night of the inauguration, and I want to know that the leader of my nation, who is often called the leader of the free world, was chosen by the people of the nation that he leads. That's all that I want. If it's Joe Biden, it's Joe Biden. If all these anomalies turn out to be just that, anomalies, and all this is just mail-in balloting and the way they started, counting in the middle of the night. But I would also tell you, nobody was counting right now in Wisconsin or in Michigan. They'd sent people home. So to say that this is all mail-in ballot counting, I don't think you can account for it that way. What I want, and what every American citizen should want, is to make sure that the election was on the up and up, that it was fair. I mean, we can use our eyes. We can go to Pennsylvania and see 50,000 people show up for a Donald Trump rally, and Joe Biden couldn't get 12 people to show up to a rally, and 6 of them that did show up would be Trump supporters who came there to heckle him. Huge energy on the Trump side, very little energy on the Biden side. Yet we're now supposed to accept the idea that Joe Biden exceeded Obama in all of his vote counting and vote getting. So President Obama, Chris Matthews had electricity running up his leg when he gave the speech, I think at the DNC, as a senator. And so he was very wildly popular among Democrats. Now, perhaps Donald Trump was just that hated on the other side, and he produced a huge backlash. That is a possibility. And I would state that that's fine if that's what happened. But we can't just say there was no fraud. We can't just say that accept the vote, because every fraudulent vote cancels out a legitimate vote. And when you have a president who gets, I think Donald Trump got something like 8 or 10 million more votes, and he got when he won in 2016, that's huge. That's huge. The economy is really doing well under Trump. Of course, the pandemic accepted. It's just there's a lot of improbabilities. All right. When you go down ballot tickets, you see, like in Pennsylvania, for instance, the Republicans crushed it in Pennsylvania. They actually crushed it all over the country. They were supposed to, the Democrats were predicted through these dubious polls. Polling is garbage, man. I've been on polling for a long time, talking about how these polls are not correct. But polling showed that 5 or 6 seat pickup in the Congress for the Democrats, but the Republicans actually picked up 12 seats. So you're telling me that you had a nationwide turnout that was incredible, the highest nationwide turnout for the presidency ever, and the president and the president of the party, right? The party who crushed it down ballot lost at the top of the ticket. This is unheard of. It's unheard of. And it's too much for me to swallow, frankly. And anybody who thinks about these things, that should be too much for you to swallow. So we should, if you live in Pennsylvania, you live in Michigan, you live in Arizona, you live in Nevada or even Virginia now, they're starting to look at anomalies in Virginia. And that was one of the states I had sort of an outside pick that VA might pull out, a lot of rural vote that usually doesn't, come out because they're so depressed, because basically all those Washington, D.C. people that live in Northern Virginia totally, changed their state into a blue state. You might get a lot of people who just rushed out. And Virginia was a lot closer than most people expected it to be. And they're now looking at anomalies there. But as I just close this here, there's so many reasons to do better investigative work. There's so many articles, and there's so many, you know, you can say there's no evidence, there's no evidence, there's no evidence, which the New York Times will just say all day long. Washington Post would say all day long. CNBC will say all day long. ABC, CBS would say all day long. But you cannot discount hundreds of affidavits of US citizens who swore under penalty of perjury to things that they saw. That's evidence. And it is their job to investigate it. But they refuse to do it. And because of their refusal and because of the way this election was handled, you're turning the United States into a low trust society. And low trust societies are not places where you and I will want to live for the long term. We must shore up our institutions, and we must return to the traditions that built America. And that is what this channel is about, the American tradition. May the Lord richly bless you all. And may this video and the other content that we produce help you to remain positive and to also take action where you are. God bless.